From the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's Tan Talk.
It's time for FLALAW, brought to you by the personal injury attorneys of Perinick, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes. This hour will be informative, along with taking your questions and comments. Now, here are your hosts for today's show.
That's right. This is FLALAW live on the radio. Thank you for joining us for your live legal call-in talk show. Hopefully you're a faithful listener and you already know that this is our weekly show every Tuesday at 5 o'clock, where you have the chance to call in and get your legal questions answered live on the air. And also tune in to just some great legal discussion about topics that affect Florida law and, of course, the Florida community in terms of civil litigation, personal injury, and then, of course, every now and then we'll have guests that are attorneys and experts in their area of law. And sometimes we have tax attorneys, we have real estate attorneys, we've even had pet law attorneys last week. Hopefully you got that great show with April Goodwin. We have family law attorneys. So we always have some great legal minds on the show. But of course, the predominant topic that we usually tend to focus on, because we are personal injury lawyers, is personal injury law. So that's going to be the topic of discussion tonight. So if personal injury, negligence, and those kinds of cases are something that you're handling or dealing with right now, then that is certainly what you want to tune in and make sure you're listening. We go over some insurance law topics when it comes to liability claims, where, we go over liability from the perspective of people that have been hurt due to no fault of their own. So if you've been in a car accident or you're dealing with something similar right now, you're not sure which way to go or how it should be handled, or maybe you've dealt with it in the past and you just didn't feel like you were all that informed, well, this is a great night for you to tune in. My name is Jacqlyn Bryant. I am one of the partners at Perinick, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes. And I've been doing this for about 14 years now. Actually, just last week, celebrated my 14-year anniversary with the firm. So I'm very proud of that. I've been serving the community for 14 years, doing what I love, which is helping people that have been hurt in personal injury, workers' comp, and Social Security disability is essentially what I've done my entire career. And so I know usually I'm hosting and we have other guests who are doing the talking, but tonight I get to do a little bit of both. So if you have any questions for me, I'm going to give you all the information on how you can call in, how you can drop your comments through the streams on the various chats that we have going right now, and also how you can continue to watch or to follow us later on the various platforms that we have. So first and foremost, if you do want to get a question in while we are live tonight, then the best way to do that is to just call in. We have our show live. We're on WTAN right now, so hopefully you're tuning in on 106.1 FM, 1340 AM. Call into the station at 727-441-3000. That's going to be the best way to get your comment or question answered live while the show is still on the air. So again, that's 727-441-3000. That's the call-in number. Now, if you're a little shy, maybe you don't want to have your voice broadcast across the air and you just want to have your question, but don't want to speak, that's okay. We have Facebook and YouTube streaming right now live as well. You can see me in the studio and I'm able to see your comments and questions that you drop in the chat box. So just so you know where to find us, if you haven't already, type in Perinick, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes Injury Lawyers. Type that into your search bar on Facebook or YouTube. You'll find our broadcast. You should be able to see that there's a red circle that indicates that we're live. Click on that. Then you'll go to our live stream and you can just drop your comments or questions right there in the comment box. And I'll read those out and answer those questions or address your comments to the best of my ability. If it's something that I don't do, if it's outside of the personal injury realm, then of course I can take a stab at it. But most importantly, try to point you in the right direction, because I find that a lot of people have legal questions and they're not even sure what kind of lawyer it is that they need. And they know they have some sort of legal claim, a legal issue, but they're not sure which kind of attorney can help them. And so sometimes that's all you need is just someone to point you in the right direction. And so that is something that we can certainly assist you with, even if it's not in the personal injury realm. So don't feel shy about calling if it's not PI. It's still okay for you to give me a ring, and we'll try to see if we can point you in the right direction, because we know lots of local attorneys who do great work, who could potentially be able to assist you, or at least give you a consultation to talk to you more about your options off of the air, obviously, if we can't get it answered for you tonight. So with that being said, we're going to be talking all things personal injury, going over some topics that we find people ask frequently. These are going to be kind of great, quick topics that will give you some quick information, pertinent information that you kind of just file in the back of your brain, because these are things that you want to know and want to have handy when something like this happens. So tune in. We're going to be talking about car accidents, general negligence, insurance topics. If that's something that you think, anybody in your family, friends, somebody that you know that might be dealing with something like this, tell them to tune in, share the live stream, tag them in the comments. That way they can come in and get their question asked, even if it's not something you personally, are dealing with. They might be dealing with it and they might have a question. And this is a great time to do that. I also forgot to mention, if you have to step away and you're not able to tune into the full show, or you miss some of it and you want to go back and listen to it, we got you covered. That's not a problem. We do stream our show on podcast platforms. So you can actually follow us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. Those are pretty much all the platforms that I can think of, but most places where you can consume a podcast, you can find us. So if you type in FLA Law on the radio, then you'll be able to find the show. You'll be able to listen to not only tonight's episode, but past episodes. As I said, last week was a great show we had with a pet law attorney who also does employment law. But she was discussing dog bite defense, and different things that dog owners need to know. I thought that was a really great show for our listeners. So if you missed it and you want to go back and listen to that show or any other show we've had, like I said, we've had some great guests. Follow us on your podcast platforms, whether it's Spotify or iHeartRadio or whatnot. If you have an iPhone, then it comes with Apple Podcasts. So you just kind of search through there, put an FLA Law on the radio, and then you'll find all the shows going back quite a ways. And of course, if you follow, then whenever there's a new show uploaded, you'll get the notification. And so you'll be able to stay up to topic on what we're talking about, what guests we have, and then you'll be able to go back and listen to the whole show. With that being said, let's jump into some topics for tonight. We do have a current event that I wanted to go over, and then just getting into some of these frequently asked topics that we have a lot of questions about. As I said, I just celebrated my 14-year anniversary of doing exclusively personal injury work, and you'd be amazed that a lot of the questions we get are similar. It's usually people have the same kinds of questions. And so a lot of times we're answering the same kinds of questions over and over, because these are the things that we know people need to understand. So that's some of the things that we'll be talking about tonight. And we'll also be going over this article I wanted to talk about, because we've brought it up on the show, but it's starting to make waves in the news. I think there's going to likely be some legislation coming down about e-bikes. And so all you e-bike riders out there that are either using an e-bike or thinking about getting an e-bike, you have to know that there's quite a few statistics showing that they're quite dangerous, and it's causing a lot of accidents here locally in our area. And we don't know if it's just a combination of, the safety measures that we have, or just folks aren't all that safe when they're riding these, or they're modifying the e-bikes to go at a faster speed than what they're designed to, which is what this article kind of touches on. And so some local politicians are getting involved. We think that there might be some parameters, I believe, in the near future that we're going to see involving e-bikes. So what this article basically touches on is that they're becoming very dangerous, and there's poor protections for cyclists, and we're seeing a lot of uptick in injuries and deaths as a result of e-bikes. And so there's been some proposed regulations on them and local city programs, that are coming about because of the increase in deaths that we're seeing from e-bike accidents. You have to understand that when you're on a bike, you're fully exposed. You don't have, this big car that's kind of protecting you. And even in a car accident, you can be severely injured. So just imagine when you're on something like a bike or an e-bike. And so, unfortunately, the data is trending towards showing more e-bike fatalities. And some of them are, alcohol related. Some of them are safety related as far as folks that are not driving them safely. But right now we do have guidelines. It says the state has adopted federal guidelines for e-bikes that classifies any electric vehicle with a top speed above 28 miles per hour as a motorcycle. So if it can go faster than that, it's not even considered an e-bike. There's 3 classes. There's a class 1, class 2, and class 3 e-bikes. Class 1 e-bikes are purely pedal assisted. Class E, they do have motors, but they're capped at about 20 miles per hour. They have a throttle that you can replace the pedal with. And then in class 3 e-bikes, they have a throttle and can speed up to 28 miles per hour. Anything faster than that is not considered a bike, right? So what the issue is, though, is that people are seeing that people are modifying the motors to be at a size of 750 watts or more, which has resulted in some e-bikes are being more like motorcycles than bicycles. And so when you're traveling at that rate of speed on a bike like that, the type of protection and the gear that you wear on a bike is not going to protect you because of the way that you've now modified the bike. And so they interviewed a physician over at All Children's who said that people are modifying these bikes to go faster than what they're supposed to, but the helmets are rated for bicycles. So bicycles are, moving 18 miles per hour. So when you're going much faster than that, these, guards and helmets that you're wearing are not going to protect the e-bike rider when you're going at that high rate of a speed in a collision. So what I think is being proposed is not to necessarily affect the speed of the class of e-bikes that are out there. It's just to prevent people from modifying the e-bike in an illegal way, to make it illegal so that you can't modify the e-bike and allow it to go faster. Of course, then that would be considered a crime, which is what they're proposing. And then, of course, children that are under the age of 15 cannot ride a class 3 e-bike because of the size of the motor and the speed that it can go. So I think that's actually pretty logical to have smaller children not be able to ride the faster motor vehicle, the faster e-bike because of the motor size. And then the fact that you shouldn't be allowed to modify them to go that fast because, again, once it hits over 28 miles per hour, it's not an e-bike anymore. It's a motorcycle. So I think these are actually pretty wise proposals. I don't know if they're going to make them, make it through the legislature, but we'll see what happens. But I think that anything that they can do to try to limit the amount of e-bike fatalities that we're seeing is probably a good measure. But this it goes, we see other places like Tampa who are actually providing more e-bikes to their citizens. Apparently there's an initiative where I guess they have mobility access issues in certain parts of Tampa, and they've created this voucher program that actually provides e-bikes to people. So I think we're going to see more and more of these on the roadway. And so the safety measures definitely need to be improved. So I think it's a positive move for the legislature to try to put some parameters in place to prevent them from being modified to go at excessive rate of speed higher than what the class 3 modification should be. And then also making sure that younger kids are not getting on the really, really fast ones, the class 3 e-bikes, to try to protect them because, as we've seen from this article, physicians say regular bicycle helmets are not going to protect people. If they get hurt and they fall off that bike and they have a high-speed collision, that bicycle helmet is going to do very little for them. And that could be why we're seeing so many serious injuries and fatalities coming out of these e-bike accidents. And I'm sure you just drive down US 19 or anywhere and you see quite a few people that are now riding these, and they're riding them pretty quickly. And there's viral videos you see on social media. I saw one the other day where there's a kid who just flies out in front of a Tesla It's like he didn't even stop, didn't look, I don't know if it was the autonomous vehicle that noticed that he was coming or the driver just reacted very quickly. But I mean, this kid could have been very, very severely hurt, if not killed, because he just flew out in front of this vehicle and just blew through the crosswalk against the red light. So you have to really be aware because these e-bikes, they are not going away. As I told you from the article, it seems like Tampa's actually have an initiative of getting vouchers for people to have them. So I think they're going to become more and more prevalent, more and more prominent. We're going to see them on the road. We're going to be sharing the roads with them. So it's something that you want to make sure you're mindful of as a driver. Just being aware of the cyclists that are around you, and not just e-bikes. You have to be aware of pedestrians and normal bicyclists that are in just standard propelled bike, because it is very difficult to recover from those kinds of injuries when someone is severely hurt by that. So there was a question that had come up a while back, and I wanted to circle back to it because I don't think people realize how dangerous some of the roadways are in our area. And I pulled up this article because someone had asked a while back, what are some of the most dangerous roads and intersections in Clearwater, Florida? And I actually guessed the one that seems to be the most dangerous because I drive on it every single day. Pulled this data from Safe Roads USA, and it basically says that although Clearwater is known for its beautiful beaches and its vibrant tropical community, there are several major roads and intersections in Clearwaters that are hotspots for serious accidents, which we obviously know, where certain roads take up about 40% of all the serious and fatal crashes that happen in the area. And so if anyone wants to take a guess, drum roll, what you think might be the most dangerous street in Clearwater. Do you have a guess, Ed?
I'm going to go with Drew Street.
No, it's on the list though. But they have, well, actually you're technically right. Where US 19 and Drew meet is one of the most dangerous intersections. So technically you're right. But the US 19 in general is the one that they have deemed the most dangerous road in the Clearwater section of Pinellas County. There is some crash data that basically says that there's about 68 deaths a year in this area on that particular roadway. So I think that's extremely high. And it's ranked the 6th most dangerous in Florida, the entire state. So that's pretty sobering to know that. Let's see. We have a comment here in our comment sections. Eye on Tampa Bay talks about a crash in Clearwater where a bicyclist was seated on a bicycle waiting for the traffic signal on a raised pedestrian crosswalk island when a collision occurred between two vehicles in the intersection. The impact sent one of the vehicles into the bicyclist. Yeah. So sadly, the bicyclist passed away. That's unfortunate. So can you explain the claims the bicyclist may have against the drivers? Yeah, so absolutely. So that's actually not that different from a case I know my partner Brian Caulfield had recently, but his was a pedestrian. So yeah, determining fault is obviously going to be part of the issue because we have a collision between two vehicles. So potentially, there could be claims against both drivers. So, sometimes speed is a factor. I don't know that we have an idea of how the incident happens. I don't know if it was a rear end, a T-bone, somebody turning left. So those things will obviously come into play. But when you have that kind of a situation, that's the first thing that you're obviously going to be looking at as to liability, who out of the two vehicles that collided, who might have been at fault for that incident, and was speed a factor, was failure to yield a factor, did somebody run a traffic light or a signal of some kind, and whether or not the bicyclist was in a place that they were supposed to be, it sounds like they were in the crosswalk, which is good. But sometimes that's not always the case. People are crossing in the middle of the intersection or at a place that's not a designated crosswalk. And so those kinds of things you're going to look at and want to factor in. But at the end of the day, there could be a claim against the driver who potentially caused the accident, or both vehicles, depending on the comparative fault. And we've talked about comparative fault a number of times on the air because it actually changed the standard that we go by in the state of Florida. Has recently changed about almost 3 years ago now, coming up on the 3-year anniversary, where essentially the apportionment of fault can be divided between the drivers or the ones that caused the accident. And so if it's found, maybe there's witnesses or there's camera footage or something that shows that one driver, did something that was, let's say that they turned left in front of another vehicle when they weren't supposed to, but the other vehicle sped up or was, going at an extremely unreasonable rate of speed. And so these two factors combined is what led to the actual cause of the accident. Had that other party not been speeding, then maybe the left turner who wasn't supposed to be turning left might not have hit them. And so we look at the liability of both parties and determine comparatively who's at fault and at what percentage. That's usually a jury question. But pre-suit, these claims can be made against both drivers potentially, especially if, the bicyclist is simply sitting there and they're in a crosswalk and they're waiting for the light to change or whatnot, and they're just sitting there waiting. Now, again, they could say, well, that wasn't foreseeable, but at the end of the day, I'd argue that it is foreseeable that you have pedestrians and bicyclists who are going to be in the general vicinity of, the roadway. And so as drivers, we have a duty to operate our vehicles in a reasonably safe manner and to keep proper lookout and to drive safely for those that are on the roadway, not just the vehicles, but also the pedestrians and the bicyclists. So that's actually a very sad story. And Ion Tampa Bay is always usually very, very up to speed. I mean, the finger is on the pulse with what's going on. I literally drove by a crash on my way home from work one day, and then it was within minutes, because it literally just happened. Within minutes, it was up on Ion Tampa Bay. So these are things that they do a really good job about keeping people alert, especially when you need to go, navigate around those kinds of things and try to avoid it. And I believe he's been on our show before, and hopefully he'll be coming back again as a host, the owner and founder of Ion Tampa Bay. So that was a great question. Thanks you for asking that. But going back to our roads that are not so great over here in Clearwater, State Road 60, Gulf to Bay, that was not a surprise. As I mentioned, the intersection of US 19 and Drew, there are quite a bit of crashes there. It looks like US 19 and Gulf to Bay, there were 660 crashes there between 2015 and 2019. That's just a 4-year period. So that's a pretty sobering statistic. Belcher Road, which is where our office is located, just a couple blocks down at Belcher and Gulf to Bay, there were 542 accidents between 2015 and 2019. So again, very, very sobering statistics that you have to be very aware of when you're driving around, that there's just a lot of dangers lurking on our roadways. I did pull St. Pete just to see what they had. And of course, US 19, which is 34th Street, when you get down to St. Pete, it changes to 34th Street. That was one of the major ones, but they actually had 4th Street coming in higher than 34th. So 4th Street North. This road is a hot spot for car accidents along the entire length. It says it has the most dangerous intersection being 4th Street and 9th Avenue North. So I was a little surprised to see that. I live close by there, and I can say that there are quite a bit of accidents, but I didn't think it would be top in the list as 4th Street North. And 5th Avenue North is also placed the list as one of the roads with having the most dangerous intersections at 5th Avenue North and 49th and 34th. So you just got to be very careful when you're out and about in these areas as pedestrians, cyclists, and when you're just driving in your car, because we see that we do have quite a bit of dangerous roadways around our area. We don't have a very walkable town in Tampa Bay, and so everybody's in bikes, cars, motorcycles, mopeds, and it's not always safe. It's not, the roadways are not always designed for those kinds of modes of travel. And so you got to be aware of everybody that's around you, especially when you go out to our beautiful beaches and those kinds of areas in the downtown areas. You got to keep your head on a swivel and just be safe, because it can be something as simple as looking down, looking at a phone, which we should never be doing, but, texting and driving, very, very big distraction. Those are the sorts of things when a split second can lead to very serious injuries. So my next topic that I wanted to go over to, which is, again, another topic that I think people are still a little bit misinformed about or just aren't up to speed. As I mentioned a moment ago, this actually changed 3 years ago, coming up next month, but there's still quite a few people that I think don't realize that this has happened. So the statute of limitations in the state of Florida for a very, very long time was 4 years. That's how it was the majority of my career as a personal injury lawyer. But now it is 2. And to be quite honest, that's actually more consistent with the rest of the country. There's a lot of states that have shorter statute of limitations. And so I think Florida kind of fell in line with what was kind of prominent across a lot of the country. But unfortunately, it does severely limit the time that you have to bring a personal injury claim. And so what's the statute of limitations? That's the time period that you have from the date of the injury or the date of the accident to bring a case into court, meaning the lawsuit has to be filed. If you don't do it in that time frame, then you're SOL. It's also the abbreviation for statute of limitations. You're also SOL. We know what the other SOL means. So that basically is barring you completely and forever from ever being able to bring that claim. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I think a lot of people are still thinking that we might have longer. They think that it's a 4-year statute still. Because I've seen some people call in to our office at times where, they were trying to manage things on their own. They were in contact with the liability insurance company and they had their bills kind of gathered. They're going to the doctor, but they're not really pressing the issue. And then over time, things got worse and their pain got worse and their bills started to get higher. And they're getting these notices in the mail and they realize that, I can't handle this on my own like I thought. Now my doctor's saying I need surgery and, I thought that maybe it would go away, but here we are, 24 months or 26 months later, and now I need surgery. And who's going to pay for this surgery? I've got deductibles and I've got co-insurance and co-pays. I can't pay all this out of pocket. I need help. And then they call a lawyer. Well, if you call, 24 months and a day later, if you're past the 2-year mark, then unfortunately your statute of limitations has run. And be quite honest with you, if you call on the day before your statute of limitations run, you may have a difficulty finding a lawyer just because there's a lot that needs to be done to prepare the file for filing. And not many attorneys will just immediately file to toll the statute. Some will. And depending on the case, maybe we would be able to, but you don't want to wait until the very, very last minute. And so that's the part that I think is disappointing to me, because cases like these can take time, unfortunately, to realize that you have a severe injury, something that's permanent. Permanency doesn't always appear right away. And permanency is one of the things that we have to prove anytime you have a car accident. And if we want to make claims for future medicals, pain and suffering, mental anguish, things like that, you need to meet the permanency threshold. And if you don't realize that your injuries are permanent until down the line after a doctor has told you need surgery, it could have taken you more than 2 years to get to that point. And unfortunately, that'll be too late. So that's something that people must remember. If you are taking notes and you're filing things away in the back of your mind, remember that the Florida statute of limitations for personal injury cases, car accidents, slip and falls, wrongful death, medical malpractice, all those things are 2 years now, 24 months. It is no longer 4 years. That gone are the days. That has changed since 2023. We're coming up on 3 years since that has gone away. And so you don't want to wait that long. You don't want to delay. And beyond that, you have the 14-day rule with your auto accident anyway. So if it's a car accident, you don't want to wait past 14 days because you could then lose your PIP benefits. And so what's that? If you don't know, PIP, hopefully if you're a faithful listener, then you should have this down pack. You should have it memorized. But if not, PIP, that's personal injury protection or no fault insurance coverage. It's what everybody has on their policy if you are insured in the state of Florida. And people think, well, no fault insurance. They don't necessarily know what that means. That basically covers you regardless of fault. So whether you caused the accident or didn't, anytime you're involved in a motor vehicle accident, your PIP, no fault, however you want to call it, it will cover your first $10,000 of medical bills and lost wages. It pays 80% of your medical bills, 60% of your wage loss. But you will lose that benefit if you do not treat within the first 14 days. You have to see a doctor, a chiropractor, emergency room, urgent care, someone pertaining to your injuries to the accident within the first 14 days. If you don't do that, then unfortunately you will lose that benefit that you pay your premiums for on your car insurance policy for every month or every 6 months, however often you pay your car insurance. You will lose that benefit, although you've paid for it. Although it's on your policy as something that you were sold, if you don't treat within the first 14 days, you lose it. So sadly, that is something that a lot of people don't necessarily realize either. So again, there's so many reasons why you don't wait. So many reasons why you should talk to an attorney very, very early on. And the beauty of it is it's free. So a lot of people ask that too. Well, what's it going to cost me if I talk to a lawyer? And have a consultation. It's not always the case for all lawyers. So there's very many attorneys out there, family law, employment law, different kinds of attorneys that do charge a consultation fee. However, attorneys that work on a contingency fee basis, like ourselves, personal injury lawyers, do not charge for consultations. And so people will sometimes be deterred by the fact that, they may have to pay for a consult. They think that, it's going to come with some sort of fee. And I don't know that I'm really injured. I don't know that I'm necessarily hurt. I'm not sure. Maybe I could handle my property damage claim myself. And they just have questions. They're not quite sure which way they want to go with it. They don't necessarily have all the information and details, but they're deterred by the fact that they think that there's going to be a consultation fee or something that they have to pay the lawyer for their time for meeting them up front. And cases like these, again, contingency fee cases that we handle at our firm, personal injury matters, workers' compensation matters, Social Security disability matters, they're handled on a contingency fee, which means there is no consultation fee. We do consult on those cases for free. Even if we're not able to help, even if it's a case you decide not to pursue, you have the ability to at least consult with an attorney and find out what things you know and don't know, because that's what's really important, in my opinion. You don't know what you don't know unless you ask. And so it's best to call and consult about those things so you don't miss your statute of limitations or you don't blow an important deadline, especially with workers' comp. There's so many really pivotal deadlines and things that can get tricky if you don't do things in a timely manner or make requests in a timely way. And so it's best to give us a call when it comes to things like that, because even if you decide not to pursue, at least you're informed because you spoke with an experienced attorney who could help you, at least guide you in the right direction. But of course, ultimately, we're happy to help with any personal injury related case that we can. So that's my roundabout. I started out with statute of limitations, and then we got into some different other topics. But that's basically my spiel with statute of limitations. Don't wait. It's much shorter. It's been cut in half. The state of Florida no longer has 4. We have 2 years to bring a claim as a result of a car accident, slip and fall, and those sorts of things. So there's really no real benefit to waiting and delaying the process. So it's best to start out with a lawyer, at least getting the consultation, which again, in our realm of the world, in the contingency fee world, the consultations are free. Now, with that being said, I want to talk to people about the difference between claims and lawsuits. So I get that question sometimes, and sometimes people use those words interchangeably. And in the legal world, they do have a slightly different meaning, in my opinion. Now, lawyers can always differ on what those opinions are, but a claim and a lawsuit are not the same. A claim can be brought pre-suit, meaning, you have an injury or you have some sort of damages, you bring a claim to try to resolve those issues. So claims can resolve without turning into lawsuits. So if you want to think of it the way we do in our office, it's kind of like a phase 1 and a phase 2. So the claim is kind of the phase 1, if you will. It's the beginning, the initiation, the action of opening the claim, reporting it to the insurance company, and presenting your losses and damages to usually a claims handler, who's an adjuster of some kind. That is not the same as a lawsuit. So a lot of people sometimes get confused and they think, I thought there was a lawsuit. I thought that was the thing we did when we first started, is that we filed a lawsuit. And that's not usually what you do first. So there's some confusion about that when people think that when they hire a lawyer that there's immediately a lawsuit filed. Sometimes there is, especially when you're close to the statute of limitations, like I just mentioned a little bit ago. But usually that's not the case. It's usually starting out as a claim. A claim is made that the attorney is bringing on your behalf by way of doing investigations, gathering evidence, putting together a demand package. Sometimes there's pre-suit mediation, and there's different legal things that need to be done in the claim phase. So the claim is usually phase 1. And what happens in phase 1 is usually trying to see if the case can be resolved at that stage where the costs are lower, and there's usually only one attorney involved, which is the attorney representing you, and there's not another attorney on the other side. There's a claims handler, and that's usually the goal when it comes to trying to keep the costs low, the fees low, and getting things done in a timely manner. So if we can get it resolved sooner rather than later, it's usually going to happen when it's in the claims phase. However, a lawsuit is not a claim, because that means it's now been taken to court. That means it's been filed with, Hillsborough County Court, Pinellas County Court. It's something that's been filed and is now a pleading in the court docket. And there's a case number that's been generated, and it's now going into litigation. That is a lawsuit. So a lot of people use those phrases interchangeably when they're actually not the same. You could think of lawsuit as phase 2. So if phase 1 did not result in the claim being resolved, and, we just couldn't get to a place or a number that made sense for the case to resolve, whether the adjuster would not offer what needed to be offered, or the injured party or our client decides that this offer is not fair, or whatever the issues may be, or the attorney recommends going further, then phase 1 ends, and it goes into phase 2, which would be the lawsuit. And so I know a lot of times we have interrogatories or questions that get asked of our client in litigation, and the defense lawyers will sometimes ask them, have you ever had a claim before, a personal injury claim before? And I noticed that tends to get people a little confused. They're like, I don't know, something like this, is this a claim? Because they're not really sure if it's what's considered a claim, what's considered a lawsuit. I'm not sure, they usually will ask, have you been sued before? Have you sued somebody before? And just because you made a claim does not necessarily mean you actually sued someone when you actually took it to court. And so there is a difference between a claim and a lawsuit. Usually if you can get it resolved at the claim level, that means it was not necessary for it to be taken through the court system. If a lawsuit is filed, that's when, the defendant is served. There's discovery exchange. There's a process of discovery responses and depositions and a mediation. Those things usually come about after a lawsuit is filed. And so that's usually the differentiating factor between what a claim is and what a lawsuit is. But I assure you, most people will use them interchangeably, even though they're not quite the same thing. So another question I get asked frequently that I want to talk about, and I kind of touched on it just a moment ago, is who pays the medical bills after a car accident in Florida? So this is a question that I want to say gets asked about 90% of the time, if not more, maybe 95% of the time by most clients, because they are dealing with a lot of medical bills and they're trying to figure out how this is all going to play out. And a lot of times the clients that come to us sadly don't have health insurance. That's just the nature of what we're dealing with in our nation right now. There's a lot of uninsured folks who just don't have medical coverage. And when they're hurt, they need to figure out how they're going to get the treatment that they need. And so that is a big question that we get asked: who's paying the bills? How's that going to work? And so this is obviously standard in a car accident is if you own a vehicle or you live with a relative who owns a vehicle, then you're going to be covered under your PIP coverage. That is the first layer of who pays the medical bills. As I mentioned just a moment ago, I'll pay 80% of the medical bills. That's PIP. If you have health insurance, then health insurance can come behind that because it would be secondary to the PIP, and it would pay those remaining balances that are left after PIP and for anything that's incurred after the PIP runs out, because sadly $10,000 isn't going to go very far, especially if you have an ambulance ride, an ER visit, hospital stay, imaging, MRIs. That $10,000 is not going to last very long. That PIP will typically run out pretty quickly. And so it's good to have health insurance to come behind that secondarily, because that will pay the bills. The thing about health insurance, though, is a lot of people may not realize is although health insurance will pay the bills, they will put a lien on your bodily injury or your liability case because they're entitled to a right of reimbursement. So although it allows you to be able to treat and see who you need to see and have the bills paid without, worrying about these bills mounting up, it does mean that, if you're able to make a recovery, you have to pay those bills back. And so that's typically how it works with insurances. Now, what about the uninsured, people that don't have insurance, the medically needy, if you will, the ones that don't have PIP, don't have health insurance, they don't live with a relative who has a car, so they can't tap into their PIP. And so they're coming to you completely without a way to seek medical care. How do we help those kinds of people? Which is a pretty big category of the folks that we do help. And there's something that we will do, which is called deferred payment agreements, where a lot of, I won't say a lot because it's not a lot anymore. Unfortunately, the way the laws have changed, there's not a lot of providers who will do them. But there's some providers that will allow personal injury patients to defer their payments so that they can treat up front without having to worry about how they're going to immediately pay the bill. And so that comes with the agreement that, the provider will hold off on immediately sending them to collections or immediately seeking a payment for the bill up front. But it allows them to defer the bill for a period of time before the doctor begins to pursue that balance. And so sometimes it can be a generous deferral. Sometimes it's, a good period of time where the patient does not have to worry about it. And sometimes, it may be shorter. Sometimes there's interest that can be involved where, yes, we'll defer the payment, but we are going to ask that you pay that back plus interest. So it just depends on the agreement that the doctors have, but it does allow people that have been hurt in car accidents to be able to treat without being, so burdened by the bills that are piling up and not knowing how they're going to pay them. And so that's what those are typically called, deferred payment agreements. And that's kind of the way that a lot of personal injury patients will still be able to treat, still be able to get the care that they need without having to pay upfront out of their pocket immediately. And so again, I know that can be a deterrent for a lot of people who they get hurt. It's not their fault. They're not really sure what to do next, but they know they don't have any insurance. So how am I going to go to the doctor or see anybody if I have no coverage and I have no way to pay for my medical care? That's why you hire an attorney and you call and you discuss those things with the lawyer so that the lawyer can help, get you to someone who can potentially treat you and defer that payment. A lot of times your primary care physicians, they can refer you to people who can help you with that. That's usually my first recommendation is if you have a PCP or primary care, call them, ask for a referral. They typically know that the doctors out there in our community that are willing to treat injury patients who may not be able to pay right up front. And so there's usually, knowledge within the medical community of who does that and who helps these kinds of patients. And so, it doesn't hurt to, even if your doctor says, no, I don't treat car accident patients, you can't come to me, but they may be able to refer you. That's what you want, is the referral so that you can get to the right place so that you're not waiting where you're potentially going to miss your 14 days under the PIP, but you're also not coming up into a problem where you've let a full 2 years go by and now your statute of limitations has run. You never, ever, ever want that to happen. So as we're getting ready to get closer to the end of our show, I want to talk about injuries. So the kinds of injuries that can come out of a personal injury case or a car accident, because sometimes I think people don't realize the severity or the permanency that can come along with aches and pains. And sometimes when the weather changes like we have now and it's really cold, those aches and pains start to flare up a lot more than what you might typically realize in our normal warm Florida weather. But that cold is like a reality check that, my body's not what it used to be prior to this accident. So injuries. So we have soft tissue injuries, and then we have injuries that can be more severe, like changes to the spine where we have herniated disc and tears, fractures. I've seen, just about whatever you could think of that can come out of a car accident. Brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries can occur from rear end accidents or whiplash. What one might think is just a whiplash, but then people start having memory issues, cognitive problems with just thought and speech, mood swings, and just feeling different. They're not like yourself. Headaches. These kinds of things, vision disturbances, could all be signs of traumatic brain injuries. And so those are common occurrences after car accidents. And so that's when you want to see a neurologist. That's when you want to have someone do the appropriate testing to find out whether or not you sustained a TBI, because it can absolutely come from a car accident. I've seen knee injuries, tears, meniscal tears from jamming, your knee under the dashboard or hitting it under the console. I've had numerous cases like that, and sometimes they can become contentious because that's what the defense lawyers will argue. Oh, that didn't come from a car accident. How did they, tear their meniscus in a simple side swipe or a simple rear ender? How does that happen? And it's medically very verifiable that these kinds of injuries do in fact come from car accidents, fractured feet. I've had clients who I've had broken toes, have broken fingers, all kinds of things can come. But the most prominent and the common injuries that we see that come out of car accidents, I think, are spine injuries. That's probably the number one most common injury that we see occur, besides, muscle spasms, muscle strains, and soft tissue ligaments, those stretching and being strained because of a car accident. Aside from that, which is also extremely common, but the spine, herniated discs, where the disc material between the vertebrae and your spine essentially ruptures. And those are permanent because there's some that I could name that probably won't say that, but most orthopedic surgeons will say those are permanent. Once you rupture that disc material, they call, one expert calls it like a jelly donut. Once that material is squeezed out and it comes out, it's not going to be restored. You can't repair that. Now, some medical professionals believe that it can be healed and it can be repaired over time. But a lot of times that is a permanent injury, a permanent anatomical change of your body. And that can come from a whiplash, a rear end, a T-bone, a side swipe, where the forces of that big, large vehicle coming into contact with your vehicle or with your body, those forces are then transferred to your spine. And your spine is not steel. It is not built the same way that a vehicle is. And so when you transfer those forces to your body, you're looking at some pretty severe injuries. And so it can lead to nerve pain, nerve issues, radiculopathy, which is basically radiating into your legs, numbness, tingling, sciatic nerve issues, just all kinds of really bad, painful, nagging issues that can just stick with you because, like I said, they're permanent. And so they stick with you for a lifetime, and you could have this numbness and tingling in your fingers, or pain and numbness going down into your legs, into your knees, or all the way down to your toes. Numbness in your glutes and your butt because of the pain that's being deferred out from the spine and the spine injury. So those are the most common injuries that we see coming out of car accidents. And so if you experience that sort of thing, it's very, very important that you reach out to a personal injury lawyer, because we're going to be best able to assist you through the process and help you manage the medical side of things so that you don't become overwhelmed by it. So I hope this was an informational show for you tonight, that you learned something new. If not, come back next week and we'll try it again. Every Tuesday at 5, you have our live legal call-in talk show, FLA Law, live on the radio. We will see you next Tuesday, folks. Good night.